there were rising levels of anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, and that much of that was related to questions they had about their gender. Are they, how can I be sure that gender really matters? And maybe it doesn't really matter that I'm a boy or a girl. And those struggles got to the hearts of both of us. It's not the topic that we would have chosen, as Kathy said, but we've got to begin where the issue is. And you know, Kerby, because you cover so many issues, more than any other show that I'm aware of, you realize that every cultural confusion is an opportunity. It gives us a chance to bring clarity from a biblical worldview. So rather than run from it, we engage it.
We're going to be talking about raising gender-confident kids. And as you might imagine, we're going to be getting into this whole idea of transgenderism. This is a book that is so significant, if for no other reason than two of my favorite people to interview are the co-authors of this book. How in the world did that come about? So first of all, Dr. Kathy Koch is in studio with us. She is the founder of Celebrate Kids. We've had her on the program many times before. You've seen her speaking at CareNet and Summit Ministries, the Colson Center, and on and on and on. A matter of fact, featured in the Kirk Cameron movie called Connect, and has published 7 books with Moody. This one actually is with Summit Ministries. But Kathy, it is always great to see you face to face.
Well, it's good to see you face to face. Thank you so much for having both Jeff and myself on.
Usually we see each other at national religious broadcasters, but every once in a while you get to come over here and be with us. Dr. Jeff Myers, of course, again, no stranger to the program, president of Summit Ministries. You know him from a variety of different things, and including author of, I think it's now 19 books, Understanding the Faith, Understanding the Time, has his Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Denver, and a very good friend. And Dr. Jeff Myers, thank you for joining us as well by phone.
Kirby, great to be with you, and I'm sorry I can't be with the two of you there in the studio. I love your show.
Well, we love having you. And Kathy, let's first of all talk about how two of these very significant individuals came together, and it came from a video call. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a fun conversation to have. I've been thinking about writing this book for a while, and Kirby, I didn't really want to write it, and you can probably understand that. It's a tough issue, lots of opinions and ideas about what is right and what is wrong, and I have a lot of friends on all sides of the coin, I guess. So I wasn't confident. We're a small ministry. I didn't know if I was really able to handle this thing. Well, unbeknownst to me, Dr. Jeff Myers from Summit was also thinking about the need for a book in this topic because he knew from the students that we teach at Summit that this was a real issue. But then he found out that I was thinking of writing it, and he called me and he goes, we shouldn't compete, which I really appreciate that.
Yes.
Let's cooperate, right? Yeah. We don't need to compete and do 2 books and then be watching and tracking the numbers. That's just insane. So he reached out and he said, hey, what would you think about doing this together? And I was thrilled because of his brilliance coupled with my experiences. And we feel like the Lord was good to us, and it was really a fun project, actually. And now we have, both Summit Ministries and Celebrate Kids promoting, and it's been really, really a joy.
And again, it pulls together both of your strengths. Of course, I have your 8 Great Smarks book here for those of you watching online. And of course, you are very good about talking about the particular needs that young people have. Mm-hmm. When it comes to Jeff Myers, we'll hold up his book, Truth Changes Everything, which is a book that we thought so significant. We sent it to some of our major donors. We bought copies and sent them out to them. So, Jeff, of course, you bring theology and apologetics and worldview. Kathy brings all sorts of psychological issues. This was almost a marriage made in heaven, wasn't it?
I think so. And, the thing that Kathy and I have in common is we both love young adults, and we love working with them. We want to see them rise up as leaders. We want to see them live out their God-given design. We want to see them love Jesus and love other people. And so when we started to notice that there were rising levels of anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, and that much of that was related to questions they had about their gender. Are they, how can I be sure that gender really matters? And maybe it doesn't really matter that I'm a boy or a girl. And those struggles got to the hearts of both of us. It's not the topic that we would have chosen, as Kathy said, but we've got to begin where the issue is. And Kirby, because you cover so many issues, more than any other show that I'm aware of, you realize that every cultural confusion is an opportunity. It gives us a chance to bring clarity from a biblical worldview. So rather than run from it, we engage it.
Well, again, I might just mention that our engineer actually is a graduate of the Summit Ministries. So, again, we have all sorts of individuals around us that have benefited from both of your books and resources and the rest. Kathy, just before we get into the meat of this, help us understand maybe the platform, the foundation for how to engage this, because it seems to me that early on we need to, of course, define some terms, but we also need to figure out what the posture for engagement is, don't we?
I love that. Yes, we believe that a posture of hope is essential. We can't be coming at this from a despair or an angry perspective. We believe compassion is totally appropriate. Frankly, Kerby, if I was young today, I wonder if I would have gotten sucked into this movement. It would be very easy, I think, if you're confused, that you could be, captured by this ideation, to use that word. A posture of truth, obviously. I think looking forward and giving kids, an idea that their purpose hasn't yet been discovered, so live longer and find out why you are the way you are, because your gender has something to do with that. And then when you put it all together, confidence would be the other one. Be confident in who you are, confident in God. Like, gender confidence is ultimately a confidence in God as a strategic, intentional creator. So when you put hope, compassion, truth, and confidence together, you get courage. And this is what we need. This is what parents need to say no to their kids. This is what young people need to be able to say no to the haters and to stand up for, the who they are.
Yes. Jeff, for just a minute, talk about the confusion that you run into, because I have had conversations with you both on the air and off the air about the fact that sometimes you have young people that go to Summit and they are there maybe because they are a little bit resistant. I've noticed some heel marks at the end of some of those doors. And so they already have some bad attitudes, or even if they grew up in a Christian home, for the first time they're away from home, they're starting to think about things, and you found a fairly significant amount of confusion on this issue, even among Christian young people, haven't you?
There's no question. Young adults today are growing up in a postmodern mindset that says that I am my own truth. I don't seek the truth. I speak my truth. Well, if you're the center of reality, then every confusion you have is your reality. And you have no actual grounding in the physical world or anything else. This sounds very strange to people who are older adults, because they say, well, obviously there's a biological reality of male and female, and that is correct. There are 6,500 cataloged biological differences between males and females when it comes to humans. But the question, the struggle for young adults today is really an identity struggle. Who am I as a person, and does it really matter that I am male or female? Maybe I've been born in the wrong body because I don't seem to fit the stereotypes of what my peers think is important. And so I don't think young adults, when they come to Summit, they're not dumb. They're deceived. Mm-hmm. They are not coming in as much resistant to the truth as just resistant to the idea that one more person is going to tell me what I need to do, and I'm trying to figure all of that out. So when they come to Summit, they feel loved, they feel connected to others. We give them the facts, but we also help them recognize God designed you this way on purpose. And as you discover that, even when it's uncomfortable, if you can just learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable for a little bit, yes, then you can grow in character, and the rest of your life will be different.
You are going to really appreciate this book. We have information about it. Of course, we have a link to both to Celebrate Kids and to Summit Ministries, and the book you can get paperback or Kindle. But early on, there were 7 causes for why this actually took place. And I think there are a lot of people that I found as I travel around and meet some of our donors, go to various radio stations, a lot of people, they ask this question: how did we get here? I mean, we never would have anticipated, say, 20 years ago, that a young boy would think that he might be a girl, a young girl might think she's a boy, or certainly no one would have been talking about this idea of transgenderism. So how did this happen? Can you explain to us?
Kerby, it's a perfect storm of these 7 different factors. As you mentioned, the first one is just our human condition. We're sinful people. We are ignorant of what is God's best. And we sometimes make an idol out of ourselves. And so that positions us to be open and vulnerable to society's messages, even when they're wrong. The second thing is there was an intentional ideology that was developed at the university level, coming out of kind of a postmodern mindset of identity, which focuses on race and sexuality or national origin and so forth as core to your identity rather than what it means to be human. And the gender ideologists said, well, look, we want to try to convince people that there's no such thing as truth. Everybody is their own truth. But there is this persistent thing about the 6,500 biological differences between males and females. And as long as people see that as important, they'll think of that as a truth. So we need to somehow figure out how to dispense of that. And many, many words were expended in this project, and you've read some of these books. They're baffling and overwhelming, but the people writing them have concluded that we're gonna change this. Anybody who focuses on gender, they're patriarchal. That's evil. It needs to be overthrown. And then from there, you have a manipulation of language, and then this all filtered down into public schools, and then mental health professionals picked this up, operating from a wrong worldview. The media exploded it, and then medical organizations and companies realized they can make a tremendous amount of profit off of it, and all of a sudden you have a huge mess on your hands.
For sure. One of the things that both of you quote is Lisa Littman, and she was at Brown University, and we first talked about her when we had Abigail Schreier on the program talking about that book, Irreversible Damage. I was speaking at a men's retreat a while back, Kathy, and somebody who was at Brown University talked about how this woman was completely mistreated because she was saying, we see sort of this rapid onset gender dysphoria, and yet these young girls don't show any evidence of that. And so she was thinking a lot of that was social contagion. And even though she is a liberal, she said, I always voted for a Democrat, stop calling me a Christian rightist and all the things they ruined her life there at Brown University because she was a liberal willing to speak the truth. And so it helps us understand, I think, Kathy, that this didn't happen by chance, did it?
No. It's such a good point, Kerby. And I think we write well about that. And I love what Jeff said earlier, that these people are not stupid. The people who have been consumed by the issue, the young people who have been, bought the lie, drank the Kool-Aid, if you will, that they're born in the wrong body. They're not stupid. They're deceived. And they've been manipulated. They've been lied to. They've been targeted. They've been chosen by people who are on the LGBTQ liberal side of things to say, hey, there's one we can recruit to our side of the table, if you will. And it's just very, very sad.
Well, again, part of the way in which they recruited them, because this now gets back to the parents, is they would say to the parent, do you want a child that transitions or do you want a dead child?
Right.
And that's a pretty powerful argument.
Oh, it's very powerful. And that in itself was a lie. We know that the suicide rate is actually highest 12 years after someone attempts to transition. And we say attempts to transition because they can't transition. A boy cannot become a girl and a girl cannot become a boy. But they make the attempt thinking that rather than dealing with mental health, rather than dealing with their depression, their anxiety, their isolation, their loneliness, and their confusion, they're thinking, oh, if I change my body, then everything will be fine. And that I can do. That actually feels simple to them, simpler than years of therapy to get rid of their anxiety, maybe. Yeah. Again, the liar has told them that. And so then it just becomes a much bigger mess. And so it's not that they kill themselves. And we've got to help parents understand that. To look back, in fact, we're sometimes asked on shows like yours, would there have been warning signs that parents could have paid attention to? And often there are.
Yeah, of course.
Where they change. They used to have a lot of friends over, now they don't. They used to help in the kitchen, now they don't. They used to want to go run errands with dad, now they don't. When they make changes, something's happened and they're unwilling to have conversations. And that is what we need to look for. So if we could intervene in that stage, then maybe they wouldn't buy the lie and they wouldn't be suicidal down the road later.
Jeff, I want to spend a little bit of time talking with Kathy about some of those core needs. But before we do, let's give some hope, because I'm getting the sense that some of this is turning around. Whereas before, you had all these major institutions promoting this. Now they're not. You have, of course, a recent court case that went in the opposite direction. And you're up there in Colorado, which is a little different than where we are today here in the state of Texas. But I'm noticing some things are changing. What are you noticing?
Several things are changing, Kerby. First of all, young adults have grown weary of this conversation. Whenever young adults get to the place where they feel like something is being shoved on them, and they don't feel like it's something that they're exploring for themselves, they become resistant. This has always been true for every young person, as far as I know, in history. And we've reached that peak point where students are saying, okay, enough obsessing about this, I'm ready to move on. The second thing is, the young adults who are confused about their gender identity when they are teenagers as long as they don't go through a medical transition, and especially if they get some help related to maybe unresolved childhood trauma, they resolve to coherence with their biological sex by the time they are finished going through puberty. So they eventually move away from this. I think a third thing that has happened right now is the legal climate has begun to change. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of young people who, for reasons you and Kathy were discussing, were tricked into going through radical, unreversible surgeries, and are now actually won a court judgment. Well, that is a shot across the bow for all these companies that thought they would make billions of dollars off of gender-confused kids. Mm-hmm. Now they're realizing that they're going to get their pants sued off of them, and so they are starting to back away. And even the American Medical Association last week, Kerby,
there you go,
has come out and said, well, now we think that our policy, just to make clear, we don't advocate surgeries before age 18. That is, there's another term for this we don't use on Christian shows, but it has something to do with covering your rear end.
Yes.
And it is that is what that move is from the American Medical Association. They realize all of their propaganda has put all of the members of their association at risk for legal action, and now they are running for the hills.
Well, we certainly do need to focus on some of the solutions. So I thought Kathy had come to you for just a minute. And again, remind people that they can go to celebratekids.com. I'm also going to give Jeff's website in just a minute. But you have a whole section, of course, you have whole books on the subject of the 5 core needs. But if we are trying to help our kids and they're really having struggle with their identity, it comes back to those 5 core needs, doesn't it?
It does. Thanks for bringing that up. So the first of the needs is for security. We have a need for trustworthiness. We have a need to be trusted and to find people who we can trust. And without security, we won't know who we are. One of the reasons that we have the gender confusion is that our young people have been listening to way too many voices, and they're not good at discerning who's for them, who's against them, who is legitimately speaking truth, who's not manipulating me, etc. So security, who can I trust? And if parents and grandparents and educators and coaches and pastors want to be the ones that kids listen to, then you have to earn their trust with honesty, with asking to be forgiven, with teaching, not just telling and yelling, etc. So when our security is solid, then we have a greater chance for a complete, accurate, beautiful identity, chosen, adopted, created in God's image, male or female, by God's design. We see him as intentional. We see that our identity in Christ is the most important identity. We actually write in this book, Kerby, that gender dysphoria is a subset of identity dysphoria.
Yes.
One of the reasons that we have so many kids confused about their identity or about their gender is that they don't know who they are in general. The culture's yelling at them for so many things. They're not launching well because they're actually complex. It's not that they don't know what to do. They don't know which thing to do of all the things they think they could do. So identity is a real issue.
Hi, Megan here, creator of the Point of View Highlights podcast. Thank you so much for listening. It means so much to me that you're here. Your support in this endeavor is huge, and you know what would make it even better? Your feedback. I'd love to hear how you're enjoying these episodes and what you'd like to see in the future. Comment below this episode or message us on social media at POV_highlights on Instagram or Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook. Don't forget to drop this podcast a follow, and I look forward to seeing you for the next episode. Thanks again for listening to the Point of View Highlights podcast. Bye.
But Kathy, let me come back because we talked about the core need of security, who can I trust, a core need of identity, who am I? But then on top of that are 3 other very important core needs.
Right. Thank you, Kerby. Right. Then we get to belonging, who wants me? So our identity, who am I, really controls our belonging, who wants me. If I know that I'm a band person, then I'm going to look for others who are interested in music and band. Kids who don't know who they are will not know who they want to belong to, so now they're more vulnerable to the gay and lesbian appeal, if you will, where they're going to attract these kind of lost and lonely and broken kids. So we have to guard their belonging. We have to make sure that they're not following the people they shouldn't be following, et cetera, et cetera. So security, identity, belonging, who wants me leads to purpose. Why am I alive? We were all created on purpose, with purpose, for such a time as this. But if we don't know who we can trust, and we don't know who we are, and we don't know who to serve, then we don't know why we're alive. And when we don't know why we're alive, we might as well die. And that's a really heavy thought, and I don't want to Boy, I hope I just didn't trigger somebody when I said that, but we've got to be really aware as the more mature adults, let's hope, that a lack of purpose comes from a lack of relationship and from a confused identity. We know that there are young people who think that if they change their body, they would find their purpose. If they change their body, they would have more friends. And so this is why this issue is so critical to get a hold of and wrap our minds around the truth of what's going on here. Now, Kerby, once I have purpose, why am I alive? Then I can develop competence. What do I do well? If I don't have purpose, why am I alive? I don't need to do anything well, and I don't even need to be well. My character is irrelevant. But when I know that I'm alive on purpose, for a purpose, with purpose, and I can leave the world a better place simply because God chose to make me me, then I'm motivated to find my competence. And when I have competence, everything changes. But you don't have it if you don't have the first four. And we start with security. So let's be trustworthy. Let's tell the truth. Let's show people that we're on their side. Let's make sure that we correct their false identity, give them truth, give them relational skills so that they're not lonely and isolated, develop their purpose with them by letting them serve, by knowing them really well, and then showing them their competence. It's rich the way that God's created you, and all things are now possible.
And again, let me just mention that's chapter 3. Mm-hmm. And if that came too quickly, that's why you need to get a copy of the book or get your whole book on that subject and what to do. But let me, if I can, maybe go to chapter 4 because it's talking about the importance of worldview. And Jeff, first of all, sometimes we have to set aside stereotypes because here's a good stereotype. Your daughter is a helicopter pilot, and that's not a place where you see a lot of men. I had a niece who was, I think, the only white female in the engineering class. So sometimes there is this stereotype that is being foisted upon our children and grandchildren. We need to reject that. And that really brings us back to this idea of worldview, doesn't it?
There's no question, Kerby. My daughter actually is a helicopter pilot. That wasn't just a random illustration that you gave there. And if she were growing up today, she would undoubtedly be told, well, if you're a girl in a 99% male-dominated field, you must be a boy trapped in a girl's body. I had a student who was an engineer. She was told the same thing by her classmates. Well, if you're going to be an engineer, you must be a boy trapped in a girl's body. All of those stereotypes come from a worldview, a false worldview, a counterfeit worldview that people haven't considered. So, and you and I talked about this on the show before. There are really 3 steps when you talk about analyzing something from a worldview perspective. The first is to take every thought captive.
Yes.
That you want to know what the truth is, understand the truth. The second one is don't be taken captive by hollow and deceptive philosophies. That's Colossians 2:8. Mm-hmm. And then the third is to set the captives free. Learn how to talk about the truth so that other people can come to a truth. So the first thing we've got to understand is that God designed male and female. He designed us in creation, though that there are 2 kinds of human beings. Different races aren't different kinds of human beings. You've talked about this on your show a lot. That different nationalities, those are not different kinds of human beings. There are only 2 kinds of human beings, males and females. That's the way God designed us, and we're designed to bear his image. So once we grasp that, then we can ask, well, what are the factors in the culture that are up against this? And the main lie, Kerby, that people have come to believe is that gender falls on a spectrum with extreme masculinity at one end and extreme femininity on the other end. Essentially, you have G.I. Joe on one side and Barbie on the other. And since none of us are G.I. Joe or Barbie, then we're all kind of in the middle. We are all non-binary. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, if I embrace that idea, which is not a biblical idea, it's actually a lie. There's no academic research proving that gender falls on a spectrum. There are males and there are females. And so once we recognize where that lie comes from and why we're so vulnerable to these stereotypes, then the third thing is to learn how to talk about it with other people. And that's one thing that Kathy and I do a lot in the book. In fact, in Raising Gender Confident Kids, we have 200 conversation starters. Here's how to say it. Somebody says to you, you got to use my pronouns. Here's how to respond. Mm-hmm. Somebody says, our church needs to have pronoun hospitality. Here's how to respond. You have a child who comes home and says, I think I was born in the wrong body. Here's what you can say, because the goal is to learn to talk about the truth. That's an essential part of knowing the truth.
What I think is so good is you have a whole section on how false worldviews and distortions affect them. I'm trapped in a wrong body. Gender falls on a spectrum, as you mentioned. My sexuality is my main identity. Gender is just a performance. So you're really giving some people what we might call talking points. And that's kind of really key to all of this. And also one of the other things in worldview is you talk about how a worldview brings clarity, brings confidence. We were just talking about that a minute ago with Kathy about that, how it even meets some of your core needs. So a worldview is more than just academic. It is really who you are, how you think, and how you act, isn't it?
That's correct. And then when it comes to gender, Kerby and Kathy and I emphasize this throughout the book, gender isn't something you have to become. It's something that God designed you with. Now, if you feel uncomfortable in your body when you're going through puberty, well, welcome to humanity. Every single person who's ever lived felt uncomfortable in their body when they were moving from being a boy into being a man, or from being a girl into being a woman. And if we learn to walk alongside of young adults and say, you're not crazy, you're not alone, you're going to be okay, I'm going to walk alongside of you. Yes, this is confusing. Yes, you can get through it. I had a student this last summer who came to Summit and said, to admit, I have just for the longest time thought that I am a girl trapped in a boy's body. Can you help me? And our team, came around him, didn't judge him for that, just loved him, and he came to realize he had body dysmorphia. He had never liked the way his body looked up against the ones he identified as being very masculine, and so he thought, maybe I'm in the wrong body. He was set free from that, Kerby, because people didn't try to ignore it, didn't try to just overlook it, didn't say you're just fine the way you are, but walked alongside of him to find out what it means to be an amazing image bearer of God.
I want to add something, Jeff, to what you've been talking about so well, and that is that we encourage our readers to know the truth and to be set free from the truth, and to not always bring it up, though. Like some of our listeners today, Kerby, are thinking, but I can't talk to my grandchild about God.
Yes.
Or my son isn't open to the Bible. We understand that, but we need to be open to the Bible, and we need to parent and grandparent and teach from the perspective that God's ways are best and God's will is best and his truth is the truth that really matters, because that empowers the parent and the grandparent and the other people to have the confidence that they need in order to speak the truth boldly. You don't have to always use scripture, but you can still teach truth. I think that's a really beautiful thing for people to maybe wrap their mind around.
And if you find yourself saying, well, this is going too fast, you're covering a lot of material. Yes, we are. But again, that's why we encourage you maybe to get a copy of the book. First of all, again, we do have a link to celebratekids.com. Great place to find out more about Kathy. You could even book her to come and speak on this issue if you would like to do so. There's some online courses. She has a podcast, which I would highly recommend to you. And so that's the first one. Of course, we also have Summit Ministries. This is some place where you may want to send young people as they are headed off to college to really help them embrace God's truth and become champions of a biblical worldview. And that's, again, summit.org. There are conferences and information there, all sorts of books. Of course, I've mentioned a few of the books already. I've got sitting on the table here, 8 Great Smarts by Kathy Koch, as well as Truth Changes Everything by Jeff Myers, and all sorts of other resources you're going to want to know about as well. I might also mention that one of the things we've made available in the basket here at Point of View is a little book that I'll hold up, just a biblical point of view on transgenderism. Next time we update it, we will, of course, put Raising Gender-Confident Kids in the for suggested reading as well, because this is just another resource that we make available here at Point of View. And Jeff mentioned something in passing. If you go through this book, there's little black half circles, and those are conversation starters. So
Right.
Sometimes you say, well, I don't know what to say. Well, the questions are very easy to find and some of the possible answers. But real quickly, you have, of course, one chapter on guiding boys to become confident men by using their core needs, and then guiding girls to become confident women by using the 8 smarts. And so for just a minute, can you kind of give us an overview? Each one of the chapters deserves a whole segment, but we only have so much time.
Yeah. Let me do an overview of the girls, and then Jeff can jump in for a minute on the guys. So we are concerned about stereotypes, as you already mentioned, Kerby. So one of the things that we can do is help girls identify how they have been created to be smart by God's choice, and then how to walk in that in a really healthy way. So it's possible for girls to be body smart and to want to climb trees and to want to kick balls, and they might not want to play with dolls. It doesn't mean that they were born in the wrong body and that they're broken. It just has something to do with the way that they've been created. It's possible that girls can be nature smart and would love to spend a lot of time outside, and it's possible that girls, like Jeff's daughter, can be logic smart and want to be able to take engines apart and figure out how they work. So we write a whole chapter about, denying the stereotypical belief and really knowing your kids. Do you delight in how your children have been created? Do they know that you delight in that? And have you identified who they are and why they are who they are? That's identity. We think that people are camping on gender because they don't know who they are, and they know their gender, or they know what they think about their gender. So the more that we talk about the whole of who they are, the greater the likelihood that gender becomes less of an issue. So that's the point of that chapter. Jeff, explain to our audience what you did with that boy chapter.
This is one of my favorite chapters. Well, Kathy, you already described the core needs, and we just took each one of those core needs and tied it to something that boys are motivated to do. For example, boys want security. Who can I trust? And the answer to that is to find people who are sages and to become a sage, to be a person who seeks wisdom. On identity, people are asking, who am I? Boys were designed to explore. Our whole education system is designed to keep boys in their seats and to deny them recess if they are disobedient in class. The girls benefit from recess for sure, but boys need it, and they need to get out there and explore and take chances, not in spite of the risks, but because of the risks. And then the belonging question: who wants me? We help boys focus on what it means to serve others. I would tell my sons, when you leave the house each day, find somebody that has a need and figure out how to meet it. Go figure out what's going on around you and how you can help. Boys find purpose in that. And then the question of purpose: why am I alive? Well, boys were designed to be warriors. They were designed to stand for truth and to fight against evil and injustice. And the more they have the opportunity to do that, the more alive they become as boys. And then finally is competence. What do I do well? Now, there's this old term, husbandman. And if you study animals, you'll probably study in a program called animal husbandry. It's how to help animals thrive. And guys were designed by God to bring maturity to the things and to the people in their realm to help those around them do better and to thrive. When you take all those things and put them together, and I know we're through all of this, you realize, well, wow, so boyhood and girlhood, these were things God actually designed. And this is the best part to me of all of this. After we did the chapters on boys and girls, we did a whole chapter on how God designed boys and girls to harmonize with one another for the good of the world.
Well, that was my next question for Kathy. Before I might mention also, there's an FAQ section, but Kathy, maybe wind us down here, because guiding boys and girls, men and women, to harmonize, because we do need each other.
We do. One of the things that concerns me are the girls I've spoken to who they don't like their gender, and they assume that the boy gender is better and that they'll be better off being boys. So we want people to respect their gender that God chose for them, and the other gender, to respect it, not lust after it or not desire it for themselves, but to respect it. And Jeff taught me a lot about how we are very, very different. We respond to stress differently. Women might want to just think about it, and guys want to go act on it. Yeah. Well, if you act when you're stressed but you don't think, there's danger. Yeah. And if you only think but you don't act, there's danger. So we need each other, and we can teach this to girls and boys so that they understand that they're different isn't bad. The different isn't bad. The different is just different. And this is why we, again, harmonize. I think that chapter is so important.
I think so, too. And again, the FAQ at the end is great because all these frequently asked questions, it goes on for quite a number. So you find yourself, maybe our child comes home from school and says, I think I'm in the wrong gender. Well, there's 24 different straightforward answers to the 24 most frequently asked questions. So that's really helpful. But But just before we run out of time, I wanted to do two things. First of all, Jeff, certainly every time we've had you on the program, we've talked about Summit. And I've, of course, already mentioned that you've had a legacy here because one of the people working at Point of View actually went to Summit and finished there. But as people go to summit.org, they can certainly find out about this book, but they can also find out about the various conferences and all the various resources. Can you talk about what is available to some of our listeners?
I'd love to. Summit Ministries, since its founding, has had the privilege of training 1.4 million young leaders to embrace God's truth and to champion a biblical worldview. And we're now looking at 93% of our students who've graduated from the program in long-term studies who still say they still stay strong to a biblical worldview. So it's a complete reversal of what often happens, which is young adults finish high school and then walk away from their faith commitment. So in the program, 12 days long in Colorado or in South Carolina, students come. We bring in the top Christian thought leaders of our day, people who have a great story, who know how to communicate with young people, and who will help them understand biblical truth. And then through the course of that and lots of adventure and fun together, we form into a community of people who want to stand for God's truth. That program has a profound impact on young adults, especially as they're preparing to leave high school and either go into a field of study or into a career. And that, I believe, is going to be, they're the future leaders. If you are thinking, yes, that program sounds good, I hate to sound like a salesman here, but the truth is we're almost 3/4 full for this coming summer. So those seats are going very fast. You want to take a look at summit.org and arrange for your 16 to 22-year-old to join us for an epic, life-changing program for 2 weeks this summer.
As you know, we have a link to that. Of course, if you type in Jeff Myers, you will be able to see all the other interviews we did. Most recent one, Truth Changes Everything. Kathy, let's go to celebratekids.com. First of all, there's this podcast, which I really encourage people to listen to. There's the blog. You have online courses, as well as, of course, your books. And some people can even come and have you come and speak in their particular group.
That would be amazing. Sure. Yeah. I travel the nation. I love to speak to kids of all ages and teachers, grandparents, parents, and we do pro-life work as well. We just want to help people celebrate kids the way Jesus did and still does. So we do that through speaking, podcasting, writing books, doing the blogs, answering questions. We're just so privileged that God lets us do what we do. So if people want to follow through, that would be great. Yeah, our podcast, Facing the Dark, I think it's a good podcast. People have been really pleased with it, so maybe people could check it out.
I would think they would. And again, you just were in Lynchburg last week, and you are here today. So thanks for driving over, coming in studio. And could you do any better than this, having two of our favorite guests on the same program together? So, Jeff, thank you for being with us. Kathy, thank you as well. Well, hope you appreciated the conversation we had here today. And don't forget that if you would like more information about what we're talking about, you can find it at the website pointofview.net. That's all we have for today. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Point of View Highlights.